Welcome back, Paul Catalina, Pierre Nugent on your Thursday. And Pierre, we're not to the halfway point yet of the NFL season, but you get to cover a team that's been very interesting this year. Listen, as a Jameis Winston super fan, I kind of hope the same thing happens eventually to Jameis Winston that's happened to Sam Darnold. I see no reason why it couldn't, given the fact that Jameis Winston was far better at any point in his life than Sam Darnold's been. But Sam Darnold has gotten in this offense with Kevin O'Connell there in Minnesota. Granted, you have Justin Jefferson. Things seem to happen well for you, but they've withstood some injuries. They've played some hard-fought games, and the Vikings are sitting here in what is a crazy NFC North where all four teams are playoff caliber realistically right now. So what are your thoughts on that? And then I will let you ask me questions about the Cowboys before we kind of go rapid fire.
Well, I mean, to be honest, with the way the division is playing out, and it's funny that you mentioned the NFC North because all four teams have at least 4 wins as of right now. And then this Sunday, we've got a monster showdown at US Bank Stadium because the Lions are in town. We got the Lions and the Vikings. Winner is going to be in first place in the NFC North. When it comes to the Vikings, it's funny because when you look at them, particularly offensively, they're not going to wow you. This is not a team that is, going to put up points in bunches. It's more of like a death by 1,000 cuts type offense. If you look at them, they're only ranked 17th in total offense. Sam Darnold has been very good. He didn't have a great game by his standard against the Jets last week or 2 weeks ago, I should say, before the bye. But right now, this team, as well as Sam Darnold is playing, this team is absolutely led by their defense. Absolutely led by their defense, Paul. The second against the run, what is it, third or fourth in points against. Brian Flores, if he didn't have a pending lawsuit with the NFL right now, everybody would be talking about him as getting another head coaching job. And it's a matter of when, if, and not if. Because when it comes to scheming up his defenses and putting guys in the right place at the right time, it's unbelievable how this guy just knows how to press the right buttons on any given day. And this team is 100% led by their defense. And in terms of how they're doing this with their offense being a middle-of-the-road offense, they're much better at running the ball than they were last year. Alexander Mattison did not get the job done last year. Aaron Jones has been a breath of fresh air for this team. And they just play complementary football. That's what I've been saying for 6 weeks. We have our own Vikings Now podcast at Fox 9. And that's the word I just find myself week after week after week saying. It's complementary. The run game goes well. If they turn the ball over, guess what? Defense has to stand on a fourth down. Defense forces a turnover. Offense takes care of it, a short field situation, punches it into the end zone instead of settling for field goals. So that's really what it's been. It's been a very well-balanced complementary team.
And TJ Hawkins is not even back yet.
He's not, and he's limited in practice this week. I'm wondering if he'll get the green light for this week, and that would be poetic considering he got his knee torn to shreds against the Lions last year on Christmas Eve. So he is limited. He was limited as of yesterday. He'll probably be limited again today. What does that mean for his status this Sunday? Not really sure just yet, but he's eligible to come to get going here fairly soon.
And J.J. McCarthy, this was his team right off the bat, too. Like, that's what's really surprising that Sam Darnold was able to, he had beaten out Sam Darnold. And in his preseason action looked good, but then was hurt, and that was it. So here's the thing. Sam Darnold's going to go make more money somewhere else next year, and J.J. McCarthy's going to inherit this team, which also adds to an interesting dynamic for the future.
Yeah, and at training camp, I remember watching training camp with a close eye. And even though Sam Darnold, when he came here and signed here, he was told that he was the QB1 starting out. When training camp rolls around, he was going to be number 1 on the depth chart. When about a week and a half into training camp, I remember talking to some colleagues of mine, and I just watched it just by the naked eye. And I'm fully admit that I wasn't a huge J.J. McCarthy believer in terms of his talent translating to the next level. However, during training camp, I turned over to some people and I said, I think this race for QB1 is a lot closer than the Vikings are indicating. Like if JJ McCarthy was fully healthy, I am not convinced that Sam Darnold would have been the quarterback in week 1. I'm not convinced of it because I think JJ McCarthy was playing that well during training camp. He was picking up the offense very well. And he's going to be the future. There's no doubt about it. But now it's an interesting conundrum of what they do now with Sam Darnold in terms of, well, do you let him walk for nothing? Do you sign him to maybe a big lucrative short-term deal and maybe have, because as we've seen, you're going to need two quarterbacks in a lot of situations. You're going to need two quarterbacks at some point or another in the season. So Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has a decision to make on Sam Darnold, but in terms of JJ McCarthy, yeah, he's going to absolutely be the future here going forward.
Yeah, that's kind of a crazy thing. I think they're just gonna have to let him walk, and
I think so too. I think that's going to be the situation. Yeah,
and be the quarterback in Cleveland or somewhere that needs a bridge quarterback next Seattle. Whatever is going to happen.
Yeah,
it's going to happen with Sam Darnold, and he's going to cash in again. So good for Sam. He waited his turn. He didn't get beaten up in the Jets and the Panthers and. Also credit to Kyle Shanahan for maybe aiding in his development, and he matured and got better. So
yeah, absolutely, and he's played very well. I mean, interceptions were a big part of the problem of his career earlier on, and he's not turned the ball over. I believe he only has 4 on the year so far. So he's not turning the ball over. He's putting his team in a position to win. There have been some close calls. There's no doubt been some close calls in some of the games that have been almost interceptions. I'm still not convinced that he's fully made the full turnaround. That would be comfortable for me to give him the keys to the car in the offseason if I was shopping for a quarterback, but he's well on his way to proving it. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Now I will let you ask me questions about the Cowboys.
Yes. Okay. So my first question is did just nobody foresee that running the ball was going to be an issue for this team? I'm saving the big question for last. But in terms of in the short term, running the football with this team, did nobody pay attention to what they were going to do on offense in terms of trying to run the football?
It's funny you mentioned that. All of us outside did.
Yes.
The Cowboys have this thing where they decide they don't have a reasonable calendar on their extensions. Deadlines make deals and all these things. So they also, I think, underestimated didn't nail what their needs were in the draft, like what the biggest needs were. Mm-hmm. And I thought they had to find, like, I'm not mad at the draft they had necessarily. I'm mad at the fact that they did not address running back when this was a good year for running backs. And a matter of fact, I think you're about to see a great year for running backs. And I think you're going to see a running back renaissance because teams know now that, like, oh, wow, you can't run the ball. You can't do a lot of things. The Bills have been so much better since they incorporated James Cook into their offense a season ago. The Cowboys and Dak has always been better when they are purely balanced. They're all out of balance right now. And if you heard Troy Aikman today, he is just on the wide receivers like crazy for their terrible routes, including CeeDee Lamb and how lazy their route running is. And that goes back a little bit, and that's McCarthy, but that's if all the wide receivers are running bad routes, like, that is on them, yes, but that's also on the coaching staff that puts them in, like, multiple people, even people I have no respect for, like in the NFL analyst game, will be like, well, this route tree is all messed up about the Cowboys. So that's bad enough as it is. And then you have a running game that's non-existent, and they get this whole thing of they love their undrafted free agents like Rico Dowdle, but, and he's a good player to have on your team. He's a valuable backup, but he is nothing more than that. And they've had this over their history. I keep seeing if he does well enough this year, Jerry Jones will give him an extension and treat him like a guy named Troy Hambrick, who was there and had, like, a good run. Nobody overestimates a good 3-4 game run like Jerry Jones. Miles Austin was a fine player for the Cowboys, but he had this game against the Chiefs once where he had like 248 yards. Yeah. And they're like, well, that's it. Give him a 4-year extension. And then he had hamstring problems over and over and over again. So, like, sometimes you just have a good game. I think Jerry needs to play fantasy football. I really do. Just 1 year, play fantasy football and understand that, like, yeah, sometimes you hit a guy for 3 games and he's good and he helps you win the league, but you don't draft him the next year.
Yeah.
You just realize that, like, yeah, the 2 guys in front of him were out. He stepped in ably. The team around him was good, but they are going cheap on running back right now. They brought back Zeke. They keep reducing his workload. I would not be surprised to see Dalvin Cook after another loss or 2, maybe even after the bye, like, just to see, like, they've got him on the practice squad, elevate him, see if he's ready to go. I don't know, but they don't know. Like, this is repeating the cycle that they did with Tony Romo, where the beginning of it was all great and everything was going well, but then they didn't have the team around him to where it wasn't like it was just Tony go save us, and now it's Dak go save us. And I don't know how they haven't seen that.
I don't know why they wouldn't elevate Dalvin Cook at this point, because in my mind, I'm like, well, how can it get any worse? In terms of, listen, I know that. So, Dalvin Cook's not going to be the savior of this run game or this offense. I fully understand that. But I remember in the offseason, Mike McCarthy was touting Mike Zimmer in terms of, why wouldn't I go out and get a guy like him in terms of, being my defensive coordinator. And don't get me wrong, I'm not throwing shade at Mike Zimmer. I still think he's capable of piecing together a great defense. And of course, losing some of your star players on defense is not going to help your cause. That certainly has an effect. But when you get blown out on your home turf on more than one occasion over this last calendar year, something's not right. So something's not right to me. That should not happen in the NFL. The NFL has far too much talent in order, to see games result the way that they're resulting at Cowboys Stadium, the way that they have been in the last year. My other thing is, I might as well get to it right now because I know we're running out of time. I have never been. Jerry does this. He wants to have a public contract dispute with his stars. He did it with Zeke. He did it with Dak, and eventually he did
it with Emmett.
He did it with Emmett.
Smith.
Yeah, he did it with Emmett. You're right. Yeah, he loves to do this, and he eventually caves after a whole fake pomp and circumstance. But you paid the running back a few years ago. Didn't work out well. Dak Prescott, I understand the numbers with Dak Prescott. And last year, Dak was in the MVP conversation. I get it. It's the most important position in the world. But the eye test has to come into play at some point. It's like, okay, he's got a great offensive line around him. The offense is well balanced. The receivers are great. This is all working well for him. But is it a product of the system, or is it because this quarterback is this talented and this worthy of this type of money in the league? You have to have this hard conversation with yourself. And I felt the same as, me as a Miami Dolphins fan. I had the same conversation about Tua. And I think I was never a big believer in Dak Prescott being the guy and being a guy that is commands the type of top 10 money in the league. I understand that's what the position is worth, but I thought the contract to Dak Prescott was a mistake. I thought it was a mistake.
I don't. I think they kind of had to. I mean, because of the dead money. Like I think it's only a mistake if they don't follow it up with the salary cap room that they have is 26 to 28 million right now. They can clear about another 21 off the books with post June 1st cuts for free agency next year. But it's also about like they have a bunch of draft picks this year. It's about making those count because they're still going to have salary cap issues because a lot of that money that they're going to clear off the books is going to go right away into number 11, Micah Parsons' pocket.
Right.
So they need to really hit it with a draft next year, and running back needs to be – I don't care if they draft one in the first round. I don't care if they wind up with the 7th pick and draft one. Yeah. Ashton Genty is out there, and he is the truth. Go get him. They love Boise State players. They've drafted a ton of Boise State players. This is the best one of them all. And no offense to my old podcast partner, Orlando Skandrick, who I promise you is not watching the show. But go get Ashton Genty. He is Cowboys are like, it's him or bust for me. Now there's other running backs I'd be fine with him taking, but if you want to help Dak, go get Ashton Genty. Go get another complimentary wide receiver to CeeDee Lamb. And don't be afraid to use these picks that you have, a lot of them, to make a trade for a player who can complement those guys. Like, do that. That's what you need to do.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised the Dolphins and the Cowboys haven't gotten on the phone with each other and made a deal for, because the Dolphins have a stable of running backs and the Dolphins are in need of another backup quarterback. And Trey Lance is just in there, even though I'm not a big believer of Trey Lance. However, he was with Mike McDaniel in San Francisco when they drafted him. So he knows what type of tools he could possess. And backup quarterback suddenly looks a little bit more important in Miami than other people were led to believe in the offseason. So, there's a stable of running backs in Miami that I think could help Dallas immediately. And then you give us Trey Lance, and then we'll see what happens from there.
Trey Lance for Raheem Mostert, straight up.
I'd do it. I'd do it in a heartbeat. Even though I would argue that Raheem Mostert is the most important back in that backfield. People look what that offense was. He was out for 4 games. And suddenly, if they shift their identity, which they're going to need to do for at least another game, the outside zone scheme with Raheem Mostert, and the inside zone scheme, he's the difference. He's a big difference. People want to see the thunder and lightning with Achane and Jalen Wright. Do not forget about Raheem Mostert. Very important running back that I would hate to see go, but at the same time, too, I understand the position that this team is in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Pierre, I expect text from you this week on wedding planning and all that.